Welcome back to the Deeper Pulse and the Culture series. I'm really excited to share today's episode with you. But first, I want to give a quick shout out to Patreon donors who make this work possible. I'm deeply grateful for your support, and I just dropped a new bonus. It's a 20-page ebook, and it can be accessed on the Patreon page, along with the ongoing series of deconstructing dogma videos that are rolling us into the new year. If you're curious and not yet a patron, head over to patreon.com/the deeper pulse and consider joining the all-access community for as little as $1 a month. There are no culty hierarchies, I promise. No bait and switch down the road. It's just a place for me to drop bonus material for loyal listeners of the podcast. Okay, on to today's episode. Content warning. This episode makes brief reference to physical and sexual coercion. Listener discretion advised. Hello and welcome to 2023. I'm recording this intro on day 2 of the new year, and the holidays are now behind us. Well, sort of they are. Chris is still bringing home tasty treats from work, and we still have 2 containers of cookies to plow through. I love me something sweet, but I gotta tell you, I can't always keep myself in check when it comes to overindulging. So if today, once again, I'm in bed with a sugar crash headache at 8 p.m., I only have myself to blame. And him. I mean, it's obviously mostly his fault, right? All kidding aside, even though it's a new year, nothing much has changed for me. Despite this every damn year holiday sugar withdrawal I seem to go through, I'm ever more resolved to not make any high-minded resolutions this year. Because this culture series has me looking at everything with new eyes. And the pressure to perform in 2023 is no exception. Now, in my mid-20s, I evolved beyond resolutions. I was setting intentions instead. New Year's Day was reserved for magical thinking. It was a day of spiritual sorcery, meditating, journaling, affirming and visioning boarding, making high-vibe commitments, and reauthoring ever-better endings to my never-quite-good-enough life story. But whether I called it a resolution or an intention, it was really kind of all the same when it came to taking action. My intentions were really just polished new versions of the same old, same old. No, I'm not dieting. I'm cleansing and detoxing to make my body a pure vessel for universal light. Duh. And no, I'm not obsessing about finding the perfect partner. I'm doggedly doing my inner work to make myself worthy of his or her arrival. A financial plan? That's unnecessary. I'll just vision and high vibe my way to abundance. It all looked an awful lot like personal empowerment, but it was really just more of the same. My anxiety in disguise. It wasn't just that I wanted. I needed the ideal body, mate, and career path, because this is what had been promised to me. My annual New Year's ritual was a byproduct of the capitalist cult hustle. It was a function of my cultural identity, one that shakes its head and clicks its tongue at me whenever I stop moving and improving. So every damn year, I'd spend hours scribbling promises into my journal, signing up for gym memberships, personal development workshops, detox plans, and online courses. Speaking of online courses, I very much capitalized on the holiday hustle while working as a coach, selling courses and coaching packages at a discount for a limited time only. It all felt a little off to me, especially when so many people would fall away so soon after signing up. I'd spend the first part of the year sending reminders, extending expiration dates, all in an effort to make up for the way I'd exploited the fact that folks were under the influence of the New Year's sales trance. Oh, and let us not forget, I taught fitness for 2 decades. The first few weeks of January, classes are bursting at the seams. That is until people stop with all the shoulding, and they start to once again choose for themselves. My point is, in the cult of self-improvement, the first month of the year is devotional time, baby. And I'm finding that it's almost superstitious. It's not easy to shake. Some part of me still feels a little anxious when I skip the pseudoscientific self-inquiry at the turn of every year. It's a voice in my head that says things like, but if I don't take time to tally my wins and my losses, won't mediocrity and lethargy just own me? How will I ever achieve anything if I become a person who settles for what my life already has to offer? If I'm no longer not quite right, how will I ever become better than I am? It's a bit of a mindfuck, which is what makes it kind of culty. In her book, Rest is Resistance, Tricia Hersey writes, "Loving ourselves and each other deepens our disruption of the dominant systems. They want us unwell, fearful, exhausted, and without deep self-love, because you are easier to manipulate when you are distracted by what is not real or true." Boom. As long as we believe we are perpetually unfinished, there will always be something new to sell us. I've done a lot of research into cult dynamics, and one of the things I've learned about the cult persona is that it's perpetually chasing after the ideal self, and it therefore becomes isolated from deeper truths and honest, authentic connection. And also, who wins when we're all so afraid of losing? Losing our youthful figures, our firm, taut skin, our thick heads of hair. Who benefits when we're obsessively investing in attracting a new lover or landing the next rung promotion? Who are we validating really when we continually jump through metaphysical hoops to earn spiritual street cred or our place in the social hierarchy? Hard-earned experience has taught me that it's the charismatic gurus and savvy marketers who stand to gain the most when we spend an unwarranted amount of time taking annual and often superficial inventory of our lives. But the real tragedy, one that's broken my heart again and again, is that it's not just our cosmetic objectives that get us into trouble. I've been burned in more than one psycho-spiritually evolved circle where the structure itself preys upon my personal values, seducing me with a heart-centered, meaning-driven promise that delivers in part, but then later reveals itself to be a bait-and-switch investment in a cult enterprise. It's sort of a shitty feeling, especially waking up to the ways that I myself may have contributed to the cultiness of self-help culture. It's a painful reckoning, made all the more so when underneath all the ethical, high-minded promises, there's a pathological underbelly, when all the good work is really just a cover for deviant and abusive behavior. That's a moral injury that lingers. It cuts deep, and it's something that today's guests know all about. Back in August, about a month into the Culture series, I dropped a message into my Insta DM chat. "Hi, Sarah. I decided I couldn't wait any longer. I just had to reach out and let you know what an inspiration you've been to me. Back in 2006, I left the inner circle of a culty New Age wellness organization, but it's only in recent years that I've come to terms with how royally effed up it was. I'm blown away by how much I relate to your story. Narcissistic leader, check. Belt level progression, check. Idealistic overachiever hitting all the marks, check. I could go on and on." I was sending a message to NXIVM survivor and whistleblower, Sarah Edmondson. I went on to share how I'd watched her and her husband, Nippy, also an NXIVM survivor, on the HBO docu-series The Vow. I told her how I'd binged her memoir on Audible and become a longtime regular listener of the weekly podcast that she and Nippy co-hosted together. "I want both you and Nippy to know that your work and the resources that you share so generously, they've empowered me to finally step out from the shadows. I've recently been sharing publicly about my own experiences. Your work has rippled out seismically, and I want to thank you." Then, on a whim, I added a final thought. "And if at any point in time you have the interest or bandwidth to sit down and talk about what is so problematic about group awareness trainings and self-help culture, I would be so honored to have you and Nippy as guests on my podcast." I figured it was worth a shot. I wrapped up the message with gratitude and well wishes, and, well, that was that. Much to my surprise, Sarah responded just a few hours later, and she accepted my invitation without hesitancy, despite the fact that she, Nippy, and their 2 young kiddos were smack dab in the middle of planning an international move. She said yes because even after everything they've been through, she and Nippy still believe in making a difference. It's what brought them together so many years back. Sarah Edmondson and Anthony, aka Nippy Ames, are cult survivors who met and married while they were each advancing through a personal and professional success program known as NXIVM. They believed they were part of an ethical movement that was changing the world, and they devoted their lives to the work. That is until 12 years in, Sarah was invited to join DOS, a secret sisterhood within the organization. they'd soon learn that a number of women in the inner circle were being abused, psychologically manipulated, sexually coerced, even physically branded by order of NXIVM's leader, perverse con man and all-around sociopathic a-hole, Keith Raniere. Season 1 of The Vow documents Sarah and Nippy's story and how they, along with a handful of other whistleblowers, banded together and worked with the FBI to eventually take down NXIVM and Keith Raniere. From the beginning, Sarah and Nippy have been doing their healing sort of out in the open, leveraging their visibility to become impactful advocates in the world of cult recovery. Both Sarah and Nippy have shared the details of their stories many times over, so we will not be rehashing all of that here. See the show notes if you're interested in diving deep into the nitty-gritty of their harrowing narrative. Today is a conversation about hindsight. It's about red flags in personal development programs and self-help circles, and the sadly too common instances where the helpful and the harmful coexist. We're going to talk about how tools become weaponized, and how teachings that promise to liberate us can, at times, leave us feeling more caged than ever. I am so grateful to Sarah and Nippy for their willingness to come onto the pod and have this conversation with me, for us. I didn't get to even half of my questions, but I'm going to trust it turned out just right. Please keep in mind that I had my fellow former org members in mind for the bulk of my questions. See episodes 33 to 37 if you're not sure what that is. But it's not necessary, because it's my very sincere hope that anyone who's dabbled in wellness culture will find the content of this convo personally relatable. Sarah Edmondson is an actor and a voiceover artist who has starred in a CBS series and more than a dozen films. However, she played her perhaps most pivotal role when in 2017, she bravely displayed the brand she'd been coerced into receiving at a DOS initiation ceremony for a New York Times cover story that paved the way for the FBI investigation into NXIVM. Sarah shares her personal experiences in her memoir, Scarred, the true story of how I escaped NXIVM, the cult that bound my life. I listened to the entire book on a one-day road trip and have since circled back to a highlighted hard copy more than once. It's a must-read for a cult survivor of any sort. Anthony, aka Nippy Ames, was an aspiring actor and former college athlete when he joined NXIVM, and over the course of his 12 years in the organization, he rose through the ranks to become a trusted leader, despite his naturally non-compliant spirit. True to form, when the truth came out about Keith Raniere, he became one of the loudest voices in the mix, doing everything he could to bring him to justice and to help burn NXIVM's carefully constructed public image to the ground. In February of 2021, Sarah and Nippy launched A Little Bit Culty, a highly informative and irreverent podcast where they discuss recovery from all things a little culty through intimate interviews with experts and fellow survivors. Their podcast has been a pivotal part of my healing journey, leading me to personal ahas and insights, and to many of the resources that I've cited in earlier episodes in this series. I owe Sarah and Nippy a debt of gratitude for their work and for sitting down with me to have this heart-to-heart. Let's get to it. Please note, the stories and opinions shared here are based on personal experience and are not intended to malign any individual, group, or organization. Thank you so much, you two, for agreeing to do this. It really means so much to me to be able to sit down and talk with you.
Pleasure.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I found The Vow about a year ago, and I started watching the series and fell in love with both of you, particularly because of your courage and the way that you have so much humility and willingness to share your story. And I found your podcast shortly after, and I think I've listened to almost every single episode. And I just want to say thank you for the work that you're doing, because for me, being introduced to the two of you was a turning point in my story. And you hear my voice cracking a little bit, because to see you share, and The Vow did such a great job of explaining and expressing why we get involved in certain kinds of organizations. And as Mark Vicente says, people don't join a cult, they join a good thing.
Right.
And it was the first time I'd ever seen my experience shared. And it helped me to make sense of so much of why I was feeling really stuck in my life still, because there was an experience and a series of experiences that I had never processed. And watching you two do that so visibly and then share so many resources that gave me language around it all, I just mostly want to say thank you.
Well, number one, you're welcome.
My absolute pleasure.
And, we had to find that language ourselves.
Yeah.
And then scream it.
I mean, what a journey you have been on.
I got dragged into it publicly. And then at various points where Sarah and I chose to embrace it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and put yourself in the line. I mean, Sarah, that photo of you on the New York Times cover, it was just such an act of courage. And it's really, I think of that sometimes when I think about the courage that I've had to be somebody who's been public about an organization I was involved in for the first time. I think of that picture and I think of your courage. And so, and I also read your book, Scarred, which is, I'm recommending it to everyone. And there's so much out there in terms of the full arc of your story and its detail and its nuance. And I don't want to drag you through the process of telling all those details all over again.
Thank you.
And yeah, I'm sure it gets tiring and cumbersome. And I want to give you an opportunity also to introduce yourselves. And if you want to give us a nutshell version of where you are and how you landed where you are, and specifically maybe what drew you to NXIVM in the first place, because what I'm really interested in exploring today is when a good thing becomes a little bit culty to your language and what those red flags are. And so if you could just tell us about what drew you into NXIVM in the first place and what that journey was like overall.
Sure. We'll give the cliff notes, and Nippy and I got in for different reasons. So I'll let him share his after. But the long and short of it is I was an actress. It was the mid 2000s looking for meaning and purpose and community. And I was introduced by Mark Vicente, who had made What the Bleep Do We Know, a film that I really liked and respected at that time. And he told me about a workshop that I did not research in any way. I just trusted him and followed his lead and ended up in a personal and professional development program, which I ended up becoming quite an advocate for, a recruiter for, and was there for 12 years. Had some fabulous experiences, some very challenging experiences, but ultimately there were many red flags along the way that I didn't know what I was looking at. And until things got unbearable and also very dark and very strange and twisted, to the point where Nippy and I and a handful of other whistleblowers saw some very bad things. We went initially to the authorities who didn't know what they were looking at. Then we went to the New York Times, which led to a front page cover story, which led to the FBI getting involved, which led to a trial, which led to the leadership, specifically Keith Raniere being put behind bars for 120 years. And Nippy?
The best part.
5 years probation.
So here we are, 5 years out. We've got two beautiful kids. I call those our silver linings, and my relationship with Nippy as well. We're focused on healing and helping people learn how to avoid the red flags in whatever they may come across and expose abuses of power through our podcast or my book, through other interviews. And we're pretty loud about it. And we probably won't stop until everybody's awake and out of NXIVM and these things are no longer acceptable in society. How's that for a summary?
Beautiful.
That was good. Mine's a little different. I had an old girlfriend approach me about it, and she had known that I was interested in just being better. I mean, when we dated, I had books on how to be better and leaders and stuff like that. And she kind of knew that would be her in with me. And it took her about a year and a half for me to finally agree to doing it, just because I was busy and I was pursuing acting, and that's something that requires, full time. You have to be in town, etc. And that's what I was doing. And she made kind of a parallel how it could help me with that. And I was interested, and I was involved with the organization for about a year and a half, 2 years initially. And then I left, and I didn't leave under bad terms. I got cast in something in LA. And then roughly around, I guess 2-3 years after that, Mark Vicente, who I had met in one of a training, came out and said he had work for me back in New York. And I make that distinction because I had the proverbial carrot dangled to me as a lure to come back. So I wasn't really coming back because of Keith in the organization. I had left because it had seemed kind of ragtag and not really going anywhere, particularly in New York City. And when I returned, it had prospered quite well. It had spread. So I was kind of eating my words a little bit, and the organization seemed more credible. So I came back, and then slowly the film didn't happen. And then it led to where we are today. And then I ended up teaching the trainings, and here we are. After the scandalous aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. What did you think it was? And perhaps there's a kernel of truth in this, and I'll let you speak to that. But like, what did you think you were a part of?
At first, I just thought I was just taking a goals program, and I actually liked the goals aspect of it for the first part before I left. And then it just didn't feel like it had anyone in the organization that had really done anything with their lives that was going to tell me what to do. It's really kind of how I felt, except maybe for like a couple other people that were always in Albany. And I felt like I wasn't being coached by someone who had any real life experience. So the product wasn't worth what I was paying. So that's one of the reasons I left. And then when I got back, it seemed bigger, and it felt like I was it really felt like I was part of a movement, because it had gotten to really credible people, and it felt like we were actually making a dent. It turns out we were really throwing rocks at tanks in the proverbial fight, but it felt like we were actually making headway in changing things. And I felt like, I was a beacon for that, if you will, and someone who was teaching and helping people become more ethical. So that's where, my meat hooks got hooked a little bit. And I felt like that's where I was able to help people. And the time it felt like we were, and people were saying that we were, and, maybe we were, when you have conversations, a lot of people are able to identify and hear things in people and point it out to them, and they can walk away feeling like, hey, that was a valuable conversation. So I still think that we were in a lot of ways, but I don't think it was anything proprietary to the organization and what Keith Raniere came up with.
Mm-hmm. I think that's key. I agree with everything Nippy said. And we were righteous about this tool set that we thought we had, which is one of the reasons, and not a lot of people know this, but most of the time, any coach or consultant or therapist, psychiatrist, psychologist, they weren't allowed to take the training. And we were told it was because they would take the trainings and undoubtedly and inadvertently even take the tools and put them into their own work, which they shouldn't do because they haven't been trained, and our tools are unique and, industry secrets and all those things. But really what I think it was now is that they would have come in and been like, wait, this is just cognitive behavioral therapy, and this is neurolinguistic programming, and this is like the main tenets of Buddhism. You can't claim this as Keith's genius.
Even worse is you have 20-year-old kids with sashes around their neck asking cognitive behavioral therapy questions and not knowing what they're doing and how to do it and how to handle people.
Right.
So it's kind of like opening up the hood of a car, playing with it and then shutting it, not knowing what you did to the car.
Yeah. Keith literally said that this is paint by numbers therapy.
Yeah.
And if you just ask these questions, but I countered things early on. A lot of the things I felt, like Nippy said, I was helping people and we were doing good work, but there's other people that would come across in my group, and I'd be like, I don't know how to help this person. Like, this is really intense stuff. People being abused as kids, darker things or more heavy things. I'm not just helping with goals. I'm getting into the deep trauma. Like, we weren't trauma informed or trauma trained or anything like that.
Right. And, we've had a lot of conversations with a lot of people about what we went through. And I can say for sure, Sarah and I think I speak for Sarah when I say this, we spoke with thousands of people over the course of 10 plus years, asking them the same questions and the same process over and over. So we got good at that. Now, whatever that was, is you can debate all day long. But what I can say is, after sitting down with so many people and having all these conversations, is that human beings aren't as mysterious as we think. And it got to the point sometimes where I could sit down with someone and ask them the questions, and I could predict almost verbatim what they would say, and even like how they would say it. So there were some skill sets and some interesting things that we did develop over doing it for many, many years and thousands of times, to the point where, I could even look at someone and predict, like, they're probably going to answer it this way. So based on that, I think we were able to kind of talk to people in a certain way that was helpful to them and beneficial to them in certain ways, but we didn't go through any sort of official training to know what we were looking at, how we were looking at, and elicit from them really what probably should have been done in one-on-one therapy if they were coming in with a specific thing, as opposed to this blanket curriculum that ultimately ended up getting them obedient to a process that a guy who was abusive had come up with.
Right.
And that's ultimately what we were doing unwittingly, which is also part of like what we had to go through to reconcile our delusion and how we did it and forgive ourselves and that sort of thing. So
in the aftermath of the sharing of my story, I have a group of folks that have also since left the organization, and we're all together. There's about almost 50 of us in a kind of a recovery group where we share our stories. And some of the individuals in the organization were trainers, and they had roles similar to yours. And one of the questions that's come up when I mentioned I was going to speak with you was really how you reconciled that. Like, Nippy, what you're speaking about, the role that you played and the use of the quote technology. And also, Sarah, you recruiting. I know that you were like one of the number one recruiters bringing people into the organization. And I know some of the trainers that I speak with related to the organization that was affiliated with have some shame and guilt and feelings. And so is there anything that, Sarah, you would say to these folks? So what helped you to navigate all of the emotions that came up around recruiting? Yeah.
Quick question. Did you have a component that was like personal responsibility, similar to NXIVM, that you take responsibility for things?
Yes. And I 100% want to talk about that. So,
right. Well, the reason I bring it up is because I see it in a lot of large group awareness trainings or anything where there's a personal development aspect to it. Other big groups that people think are cults that are science-based, for example, have,
are they tology based as well?
Tology based and science based, or things that rhyme with schmandmark, things like that. There's allegations that allegedly it's been said that, and it's only my opinion. And of course we're laughing because all these places are so litigious, which is a huge red flag for me now.
Yep.
But yeah, there's this element of, you cause your life, and there's always good in that. Like, something happens to you, you don't, just complain about it. You go, well, what were my expectations that I got myself here, and what were my choices? And you can take responsibility to a degree. And the flip side of that is that if you take that to a unhealthy level, you can always be blamed for anything in your life, and it's always your fault. And certain science-based organizations make it always your fault. The leadership is never at fault. It's always your fault. Anyway, the reason I say that is because when I left, definitely I had a great deal of shame and regret and embarrassment and all sorts of things. And I feel like I've been out for 5 years and I've gone through different stages, no longer in that stage. And one of my therapists, cult specialists, helped me see that, beating myself up about what I had done was also like a method from the group, from the cult.
Yes.
That's, how bad are you? You're a piece of, like feeling really unworthy or like, bad internally that I had done these things, versus recognizing that, and I know this of myself to be true, and I think people who know me know this to be true, that I have a good heart and I've always wanted to help people. Obviously, we bet on the wrong horse, and this was not the thing to help people. But I know that when we saw what was bad and we could see it, we did the right thing and brought it to the authorities and helped take it down. But of course, I still see there's one particular person who's still involved in NXIVM, and I recruited her. I brought her in. So it's not that I feel guilt necessarily because I didn't move to Albany. I didn't start a sexual relationship with Keith. I didn't do the things that she did. She did make choices based on her wants and needs and desires. And I can't take responsibility for that. I can take responsibility for telling her about it. And
your
bringing
participation.
her. I participated. That's the next question. Like, what's your participation? And Keith would always take that to the nth degree, saying like, how did you even participate in the Holocaust, which happened years ago? Like that's the craziness of how that would be taken too far. And his answer would be, your participation is in what you know and think about it now, and how you make sure that the history is told accurately. That's your participation in it, even though you weren't alive when it happened. So did I participate in them joining? Yes. Did I participate in trying to help get them out? Yes. Mm-hmm.
But you also weren't participated in how they were targeted and
right.
how
I never lied to them. I never lied to anybody. I never recruited anybody under false means. I truly thought that I was recruiting people into something really good. And, if anything, I'm guilty of being naive about Keith and his sex life and people's, Nippy always says this, like, we were naive about people's ability to lie. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We underestimated people's ability to lie to us. I'll add one caveat to it as well. Like, shame and those emotions are normal. And I think allow yourself to have them, because I think they're informative in a lot of ways. But if you allow them to cripple you, you let it win in a lot of ways. And if you know your character, and shame is the only thing that you kind of have to overcome to fortify your character, then you're kind of lucky in a sense. That's the only thing, because shame is something that you can actually overcome by doing things and being active and proactive. And what I mean by that is, if the perpetrator, in our case, it was Keith, understands the tool of shame and humiliation, they understand that leaving and holding him accountable will require you to go through a lot of shame and humiliation and embarrassment, right? And the closer you were to him, the more humiliated and shamed and embarrassed you were. And there's evidence of this in all the way he treated people close to him. And I think when he understood that people were leaving, it was his MO to embarrass and humiliate them as much. In fact, there's a scene in The Vow where he actually says, "Shame on Sarah for doing this," right? He was trying to amp up the heat of shame on Sarah to silence her and get other people after her. And when he had his harem down there to Mexico, he had that ceremony where they all had to perform fellatio on him. Now, if you're scared of people leaving under duress, and you know that shame and humiliation will keep them loyal, because if they turn against you, they have to say, yeah, there was a fellatio blowjob, Sarah. They have to come out and say all these things that incriminate themselves to hold him accountable. Yeah. He knows that that's the way to do it, and that's the tool. And that's the level of psychopathy you were dealing with these people. So for Sarah and I, it was different. For me, it was, eating my humble pie that other people were right about this guy and I was wrong. And I had to kind of look at my friends and peers and, had the proverbial egg on my face. And I decided, that's not going to be so bad for me to hold this guy accountable. I think I'm going to go, I can handle that. And that's different than anything else that was done to the women that were close to him. And the women that were close to him were the ones that could really take him down. And that's, I think what Lauren Salzman did. For those of you who don't know, she's the one that really put the nail in the coffin on the testimony and admitted all this stuff. And she went through, I think, I don't see her this way, but I think that's what she had to go through to totally humiliate herself. And like what she'd been doing for 20 years to make what she had done right. And I think that's the mechanism of how shame can be used proactively. And it's up to you to figure out how you're going to transcend it. That helps.
Tremendously. It's brilliant. And it moved me on a really deep level when you spoke to how heightened that shame is the closer you are to the leader. Yeah. It makes me a little emotional, frankly, because I was in the innermost circle in the organization that I was in. And it was 16 years ago that I left.
Wow.
16 years. It took me that long to even understand what had happened and then to speak out. And I just love what both of you are saying in this sense that shame is really the great silencer and that we can play into that, or we can sort of use it almost like fuel to reorient our perspective around it and to speak up despite the humiliation, despite the regret.
And to recognize that it's common.
Right.
It's common on a small level. It's common on a big level. One of the biggest inspirations for me was Mike Render from Scientology. That guy was an actual perpetrator for that that religion had all the blood on his hands and then did an about face.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we thought of him and Leah Remini.
I was like, if he's doing that,
we could do it too.
Yeah.
So,
and keep in mind, like, and actually this is why we're so passionate about like the hashtag I got out movement, similar to hashtag me too, where all of these people are coming out and sharing their stories like you, who sat on things for many years, not knowing how actually not alone they are.
Yeah.
And that's honestly why I think so many of these things still exist, is if people wake up or start to recognize they're bad, they slip away quietly, because who wants to be attacked legally, emotionally, physically? And I know for us, before we were decided that we were going to go public, we were, our part of our plan was like just slipping away quietly, and everything's great and thank you. We can just part ways amicably until we really saw how many women had been brought into DOS and how many women were getting branded and how many women had ended over nude photos, and people were being treated way worse than I was. And we knew that we couldn't be quiet, but the shame keeps those things in place. And the more united people are, the more people can speak freely about their experience and not feel ashamed. And I do think that that's happening. Like, so many people are coming forward and saying, yes, I was a part of this, or I participated in that, or I was in this group or that group. And yes, it's correct. It's bad. And this is why. And I think that's largely because of, I think the hashtag I got out is still very small, but just generally in the zeitgeist, there's more of an acceptance. It's like kind of a surprise now if people weren't in some cult of some kind to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or abusive relationship.
Exactly. It's everywhere. And that's the series that I'm doing. I call it the culture series, and the word cult sort of in quotes, because it's like, what puts the cult in culture? Because as I started to explore and educate myself, it was like, wow, this is everywhere. Like, it's just a spectrum in terms of how it's showing up, right? Like, my experience might have been a 6 and yours might have been a 9, and there's somebody over here who's having a 2, but it's everywhere. And these dynamics need to be outed. And I love the I got out hashtag. I use it frequently, and it's really helped me. And I was actually talking with Jarette, one of the founders of I Got Out. She and Lisa are going to be on the podcast, which I'm really excited about. And I was speaking with her, and I told her, I got really emotional when I told her I shared my story, and one of the posts on Instagram with a photo of me standing in the studio that I was running where all the shit was going down, and had posted part of my story, and I tagged I Got Out, and they shared it. And it was so meaningful and validating that they shared it. Like, the impact that tiny act had on making me feel safer and more courageous, it just can't be overstated. And same with you showing up here to validate my experience and the experience of the folks that I represent. So, yeah.
We had someone do it for us. So it only seems natural to
pay it forward.
Yeah.
Pay it forward. Yeah. So I want to talk about the curriculum, because there's a commonality with the organization that I was involved in, and others, quite frankly, in the whole New Age wellness community. All of these pieces sort of overlap. You did something called EMs as a part of NXIVM, and the exploration of meaning, that's what it stood for, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So when you speak about sitting down with people and talking with them and having these sort of experiences where things were being, like, there was a replication of experience and you could kind of predict what was going to happen, are you speaking about EMs specifically, or other sorts of work that you did?
No, that was mostly with the curriculum.
EMs are similar. I mean, both the curriculum and EMs were this set of questions around certain things. So people would bring in, something that they were unhappy about or something that they were angry about. Like, the intake forms were questions like that. Like, what's something in your life that you're not okay with, or a time that you were angry, or somebody that you react to. And then we had like a sheet of questions to answer regarding that thing, that we would hopefully unearth what was the root cause. So that's sort of the through line, whether it was an EM or one of the exercises in the 5-day training itself, or an ethos, which is the ongoing goals lab program. Each one of those things had a different set of questions depending on what the thing was that we were discussing.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it was very paint by numbers in a way, but I feel like probably Nippy and I both went off those numbers a little bit, just using our own intuition and humanity that, wasn't always present.
Yeah. The EM process to me was always vague.
It was supposed to be measurable and specific, and it
wasn't. And there's like Sarah and I were called EM practitioners. If you were to come to me with, you react to someone not cleaning the dishes when they said they should have, and I help you work that issue, and Sarah helps you work that issue, there's no way we would do it the same way. But if we're doctors and it's a heart surgery, there's a protocol to like how we have to go about doing it. Maybe there's a little bit of nuance to how I do it and Sarah do it, but it's pretty much you have to do the same thing. And so to me, I never liked it. I never liked how they measured it. And it was always impossible to get evaluated. And it became something that I stopped pursuing after a while because I just lost belief in it. And some people, that's all they did was EMs. So I imagine they got good at hearing what was going on with someone and then just kind of regurgitating it back to them. That's really what, like, I felt like the good ones did. They could hear what you were saying well, but I just didn't feel, sometimes they felt like the first couple, 4 or 5 felt profound. And then after that, they were kind of like, it was a stretch, and I wasn't motivated to get them or give them.
So the meaning that's being explored, there's like theoretically what's happening, and then there's what's actually happening. And what I'm curious about was, did it pretty much always or often circle back to sort of being at cause? Like sometimes if I'm upset about something, is it my work to do? Like, I guess what I'm wondering about is I notice in my experience and in a lot of what I see is there's the real sense of putting it back on you, right? Like it's your work to do.
It is your work to do because it's always your meaning.
Oh, okay. Say more.
But it wasn't put back on you in a gaslighty sort of way.
It could be. It could be.
It depends on the practitioner. But like if Sarah and I were exploring something, I would always be like, I would get her to define safety, because a lot of them came down to safe and unloved. And you get them to define the word love. It's when, the person gives you attention. Well, can they give you attention and not love you? Like it's finding the inconsistencies in your definition, and it gets you to start think in your head about stuff. And then you could come away and be like, yeah, I think attention is love. Maybe it's not. And that's kind of you could read that in a book.
A lot of the things were things that were linked inappropriately. Like the dishes example that Nippy just brought up. And I think I talk about this in my book. That one of my first EM that was really profound for me, or at least I thought it was I was reacting to my boyfriend at the time, leaving dishes in the sink and making a mess, like really angry. And when you drill down on what are dishes in the sink, what does it mean? What does that mean? What does that mean to you? A memory. So if you did it well, and this is psychology 101, truly, this is not that profound. But for me, it was at the time, because I'd never worked on it in therapy, is the memory that came up was my parents fighting. One of my earliest memories before they split up when I was 2.5 of them fighting about domestic stuff, specifically whose turn it was to do the dishes. And so all the practitioner had to say was, what if the dishes didn't cause them to divorce? And for me, that was a profound thing, because in my little brain, whenever I saw dishes, I felt like the bad thing was going to happen and that me and my boyfriend at the time were going to break up. That's not reality. People break up because of a whole bunch of things, not just dishes. So now post EM, I'd see the dishes and I wouldn't get upset. I might be like, hey, can you do the dishes? But I'm not going to, freak out at him. So that would be an example of how an EM could be useful, changing the meaning on the dishes based on what I made the dishes mean from my early childhood experience, if that makes sense.
But I would add something else to that. First off, that's something you can just grow out of in life.
Sure.
Right. And number 2, Sarah, who has a pretty agreeable personality, right? If someone sits down to her to do an exercise and you've paid money to do the exercise and they say, do you remember a time in your life where you felt this? You're going to go back and you're going to find one to make the exercise work.
Yeah. Yes.
So to suggest,
I want to change.
Yeah. To suggest that it was this EM process that linked to this memory through dishes, to me is total bullshit.
See, this is where I think Nippy and I disagree. I actually think there's
I'm not saying that they're not related. I just think the EM process had someone who was willing to go through the process, who had buy-in, and then came out and was an easier person to go back, find a situation and link it to the dishes and then go, the EMs are amazing. We set the conditions for you to have an awareness that that doesn't mean this. And to me, for me, in my first one, my arms are folded. I was difficult. So I wasn't chosen as someone as an example. They had to bring someone in who was a little bit, because I just didn't know what you're doing. Why are you looking underneath my hood? And why are you asking me these questions? I don't know you. And then I had to, get someone, who are trusted.
A lot of my EMs where I did help people, because I agree with Nippy, like they kept changing the standards. It was really hard to get evaluated. I barely passed, but I knew that I could help people. And often it was things where people would share something that had happened and I could imagine them as a little kid based on what they told me. And it was kind of questions like, what if you knew then that you were okay? Or what if you knew then that you were lovable? Which is not what you're supposed to do in an EM. You're supposed to be like, and what if your mother never loved you? Oh. That typical, and helping people feel okay without the love, because they wanted people to feel that they were okay without the attachment. That was one of the reasons why I didn't get very far, is because they're like, you're not getting to the fear, you're not getting to the root of it. But that's just how some people did it. But just to answer your other question in terms of meaning, I think that's how it was done in a way that was helpful. But for example, cut to 12 years later, and I don't want to get a tattoo. And Lauren EMs me saying, what does a tattoo mean to you? I'm like, well, it's a mark on my body and it's something permanent. And she's like, what if it means a commitment to your growth? Mm-hmm. So she's changing the meaning for me so that I agree to do it. That's where the manipulation can happen. And I think that happened a lot to people who were closer to Keith under the premise of, we agree in this curriculum that we have limiting beliefs and we have things about ourselves that are not true based on our early childhood belief system, which I still believe. I still believe that there's things that we believe about ourselves that are not true. So if you believe that and you go into a system where you're in a rank and people above you know better and they can see those beliefs in a way that you can't because they're more evolved on this system that you've agreed to that's supposed to be measurable, they can always say, what if it doesn't mean that? Or if I want to express something that I'm upset about, they can always say, you seem reactive, go get an EM or go journal on that or go sit with that. But because you can't be upset, because that points to, they call it a disintegration, which is another way of saying there's something wrong with your thinking.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And really the subtext is you're not being compliant enough.
Yeah. Any sort of reactivity, which is just normal human reactivity, having a feeling about something is sort of reframed that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate, Nippy, you said people who have buy-in, that phrase really jumped out at me. I want you to share a little bit about the straight path and these levels that, Sarah, you just mentioned, this idea that people who are further ahead, and in the organization I was in, there are literally belt levels like the martial arts. I mean, it's so similar to NXIVM. It is in the way that it's set up. And I always thought the people who were ahead of me on the path, they had more information than I did. And it was all kept really hush hush, like what was in each training. So if you could tell us what the straight path is and then just how it functioned.
So with everything in NXIVM, there's what we were told something was, and then what it actually is. And what we were told it was a martial arts system of growth, and that there was nothing else in the introspection field in therapy or personal development that had any measurability. So people could say, oh, I'm happier, I'm achieving my goals, but how do you know? How do you measure it? And so we believe that we had the first introspective science that was measurable, made it a science. It was measurable, duplicatable, verifiable. And it was measured by these sashes, just like in martial arts, that you wore around your neck that everybody hated when they first got there. And then if you stayed, you'd grow to love. I know I sure did. And you start with a white, you're a student, then you become coach, which is yellow, orange, which is proctor, green, senior proctor, blue, counselor, purple, senior counselor. And there were more after that, but nobody ever reached those levels. And you had to do certain things to get to the next rank that measured three things: your ability to recruit, how many classes you've taken, and then your personal development, your own personal growth. So the first two things were actually very measurable, but the third thing is not measurable. So I could set a goal like I want to be less controlling, or I want to not react to the dishes and things like that, and think that I was working through it. But my coach or the upper ranks could say, no, you're still being controlling. even to be like, oh, I've worked through this issue. I feel so much more relaxed. I think I'm ready for my next stripe or my next sash. And then be like, well, even the fact that you just asked for it means you're trying to control things. So no, you're not ready.
Meanwhile, a lot of the people that outranked you, you would run laps around out in the real world in any other profession or any other job or anything like that. And actually achieve more than the external world than within the organization. So there's always that caveat.
Yes. Thank you. And that is something that I start to see is that like people were telling me above me that I hadn't worked through X, Y, and Z. And I'm looking at them internally because you'd never say this because it would be sacrilegious. You know, they haven't worked through those issues. Like, how can she be telling me this when she's clearly got, like, for example, an eating disorder?
And they can't pay their rent. Like,
this is supposed to be a success program.
Right.
And they're telling me to leave Vancouver where I'm so successful to go live in Albany. So I'm like, because I'm being too materialistic. I'm like, wait a second. I thought this was a success program. I'm achieving my goals and now I'm being too materialistic. Like, these are the kind of things that started to not make sense towards the end. But, I think that what we know now, and this is a chapter in my book, is, and I'm sure you've experienced this with the ranking system in your organization, is that the ranks are there as a motivation to keep paying money, to keep going, to stay in, to keep working on yourself. And Keith even told me it's the illusion of hope. And this is the same thing with MLMs, like getting to diamond, getting to sapphire, getting to gold, bronze, whatever the next thing is. You need to have that motivation to sell more, to be more, to create more, mostly so the company has fresh blood. Keith's words, not mine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then they keep adding levels because it feeds the bottom line.
Yes. Yeah. Well, the thing that they keep changing the most, and this is the same with Scientology, is that they kept changing the standards. So at one point I did qualify to be an EM practitioner, which is when you can make money as in doing EMs. And then I got to that level and then they sent everybody back to level 1 and I never passed level 2 again. I got to level 5 the first time and then everybody went back and I was so mad. I was so mad.
I'm going to jump on that, the anger piece. So there's this moral injury that occurs and they're sort of waking up to that and reckoning with that. And Nippy, you said, it was either on a podcast or somewhere, you said, if this isn't true, then what's real? Like having that moment where the ground that you were standing on just falls out from under you. There's sort of navigating that moral injury and all the emotions that come from that. We already spoke about shame a little bit. I'm curious, like, what role did anger play in this journey of waking up, of taking down NXIVM, and in your recovery? Like, what's been your experience around how to navigate the anger and what use you can make of it?
You know, I mean, the initial anger, I'd go through my process and what I felt like anger, how the anger was for me during the whole thing. This man felt like he could do something to my wife physically in a very private area. Right. And this is a guy that I knew. I didn't know him well. I met with him when we went to Albany. We didn't spend a whole lot of time together. I can't imagine anyone else that I know doing anything like that. And if they did, sorry, but I would have showed up at their apartment or house and I would have dragged him out and I would have dragged him down the stairs and I would have beat the fucking shit out of him. That's just me being honest with my primal instincts. And that's what I do. And there's a lot of my friends that know me, like from my past, that I've met with and like I played sports with and was competitive with. And they were like, dude, how did you not? And I was like, right. How did you not? Like, they're like, I know you. And I'm like, I know. And ultimately what the decision was, and I told Sarah this months after I went up and did what was documented in the documentary of yelling at Lauren and Jim and a few other people that we strategically did. But there was a moment where I was going to go rogue, and just to set the scene, where he plays volleyball is at like the sports barn. And right in the sports barn is a batting cage for baseball players. And there's like 3 of them and there's bats just laying out in this thing. And I thought, I'm going to go up there. I'm going to grab one of those bats and I'm going to go to volleyball. And there was a moment where like we had a whole plan set. And then I was literally like in the choice point of like, I'm going to fucking do this. This dude can't get away with this. And like, I caught an image of myself in the reflection of the window. And like, I snapped myself out of it because ultimately, if I get in trouble, my wife and child who need me right now don't have me. I'm in jail or whatever happens. You start handling your problems with violence, you put yourself in a totally different category of culture and society that I wasn't interested in being a part of. And I knew, and I bet large, that when this thing's resolved and all the cards are on the table, right, this guy's in trouble. This can't exist. Like whatever you can say, but my wife did, and the narrative that they were going to say that she did it on her own and she's an adult, a consenting adult. Like if it came out that that's how it was going to be, I still knew where he lived. I still had the option to go do it. And I just didn't want to handle my problems with violence for all those reasons I cited. And also like, I was probably going to have to hit a couple friends on the way out the door. And I didn't feel like doing that either. And, you know, that's not how I was raised. And I didn't want to be a part of that demographic of society. And ultimately, you know, it was the right decision. And when I think about it, I still want to beat his ass. You know, I still have that primal impulse, that itch to scratch of I didn't get to defend my wife and my family. And he's over there still playing the card of he's this moral person who's misunderstood and all that, but he's doing it in jail where he belongs. And he's in 23 out of 24 hours of the day in a special housing unit. He doesn't get sunlight but 1 hour a day, and he's right where he belongs. And I think a lot of that is because I didn't go do that.
Right.
So universe is always right, you know?
Yeah, it gets it eventually, right? If you're just patient enough. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. Well, there's a great quote. My dad's an architect, and there's a famous architect called Le Corbusier. My dad's quote that he says is, "Life is always right." So I keep that in mind.
Yeah.
And so, you know, in terms of anger, you know, anger was one of the many emotions that I was handling at the time.
Sarah, when I think about anger, I think about the moment when you looked in the mirror and realized that it was Keith's initials on your body, which is not what you had agreed to by any means. I think about a moment like that, and I think about the way that, you know, and I don't mean to like generalize in terms of gender, but like, I know as a woman, I tend to internalize my anger more than externalize it, more than want to lash out and cause harm to people. And sometimes the thing that I need to do is move that energy out through action. And I feel like you did that. So tell us how that was for you, like feeling all of those feelings and how you channeled it into such constructive behavior.
Yeah, I appreciate that you say that. Sometimes I don't feel so constructive. I don't even know. I don't really remember, to be honest, that particular moment. The moment that I remember the most was just before that, when I spoke frankly with Mark Vicente, and he shared with me what he knew, which was that women were being given assignments to have sex with Keith. And I knew about the group, but I didn't know about the sex component. And he didn't know about the branding. So basically, he told me what he knew, and I told him what I knew. And also he shared his opinion, which is that Keith is a sociopath and a con man. And it just made everything make sense. All the things that never made sense over the years. And that in and of itself wasn't even, I don't even remember feeling angry right then. I just remember feeling like the rug got ripped out from underneath me. Anger came out at different times and inappropriate times. Like I remember when there was one moment when my mother was trying to console me, and she was trying to just like put her arms around me. And I just like it was a moment where I needed space. And I just wanted to be left alone. And I took it out on her. It's something that I feel like I haven't quite fixed with her yet, because I just didn't know, like my boundaries had been so crossed, you know, or just like, you know, lashing out at Nippy or my family. There's moments when Troy, my eldest, will like jump on me to play. And if it surprises me, I get really angry. And that's like a leftover. It's like a PTSD response. So yeah, I feel like I channeled it initially with being an advocate, with going public with gathering everybody. And, in our early days, we got everyone together and got people to talk and share and express. And that was really healing. And, using that anger to take action, calling various organizations in Albany, the authorities, the local health board, to let them know that there was overcapacity at their local clubhouse. Anything we could do to stir shit up, not just sitting back. And a lot of people did just sit back. A lot of people woke up and thought, well, that was shitty. I better move on with my life. And I couldn't do that. Partly for all the reasons we've talked about before, because we'd been such advocates. And I don't really feel angry anymore. Actually, no, that's not true. I get angry when I see my former friends shit talking me. Actually, I don't know if it's anger. It's more just like maybe it is anger. It's like irritation. It's like, and sadness too, because I want them to wake up.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It sort of circles to my final question for you too. There's a moment in The Vow season 2 where Nancy Salzman says, well, 17,000 people lives were changed and made better by this. Where are they? And that moment was like a record scratch for me in so many ways.
Right.
Because I think about the people who are still involved in the org because there's a lot of people, quite honestly, on the fringes of the movement that are benefiting. Mm-hmm. And then there's all these people in the center, and that center keeps growing and growing and growing exponentially, who are being harmed. What would you say to the people who are saying, well, there's so many people who are being helped by this, though?
It's a straw man's argument, because you can help people and abuse people at the same time. Right? Like Hitler built the youth camps. He built the Autobahn. He got Germany out of the economy.
That's Kanye's thing right now, right?
Oh, is it? God.
Yeah.
No, but that's how he got power. He had to give them something good in order to get people in a position believing him, so that he could then abuse them and accelerate his own clandestine agenda. So you can say, yes, that's true. Some people are being helped, but that's how the abuser gets power. They don't do it by abusing you right away.
Yeah.
Right?
It's like the Autobahn was Hitler love bombing people. It's like, I'm going to do good things for you.
Yeah. No, I mean, well, he promised them.
Yeah.
He identified a perpetrator, made them the problems of Germany, and then he promised to get them out of the economy and get rid of the perpetrator.
Mm-hmm.
It's an age-old equation. You see it actually going right now in our political realms. Political extremes. Like, it's the whole thing's abusive. Go on Twitter. Everyone's abusing each other. It's not, those things can coexist, and it doesn't necessarily mean if the person's helping people, he's an abuser. He might have a bad day, but if it's coming out decades and the accusations are identical over time, there's a pattern there that cannot be ignored. And if you're choosing to ignore it, you're going to deal with the consequences of that. And that's, the universe responds to who you are, not who you pretend you are, and that's what's going on with those loyalists. No one's buying it. And all they're doing is going to echo chambers, and they're aligning themselves with alt-right stuff who buy into the no victim mentality, and they lie when they tell the story. They don't tell the whole thing. They lie to the people interviewing them and show them the good stuff. You can show people the good stuff. It doesn't mean someone's not abusing you.
Yeah.
There's a moment in my book that was one of the cracks in my the dam that eventually broke. It didn't break then, but it was when I was sitting down with somebody it was one of my best friend's husband, who didn't like that she was taking courses because he'd gone online, and I thought he would just, believed the media campaign, the smear campaign. So I sat down with him, and he showed me all these things that had been said about NXIVM over the years, all these terrible things. And a lot of it I hadn't read, because we'd been taught not to. And that would change our, quote, internal representation of Keith. And that would be dishonorable, and that would be violent. And that's what the media seeks to do. So, when he was sharing these things, I'd heard about some of them, and I basically said, no, Pepe, that's all a smear campaign. That's a smear campaign. And, he said to me, Sarah, do you know that's not how the media works? They can't make stuff up entirely. I mean, they can embellish and they can slant and things like that, but Like, what if just 10% of what's being said here is true? How would you feel about that? And that was one thing he said. And then I tried to show him the Tourette's video, which you've seen in the Vow, and the film that had been made. And I thought this was going to change everything because it would prove how incredible we are and how it works and blah, blah, blah. And he wouldn't even watch the trailer. He shut my computer and I said, see, you're not willing to look at how good this is. He's like, I believe you that there's good. You're not willing to look at the bad. And that really stuck with me. And I think that when you look at anyone, in your case and ours, people saying, but look at all the good, look at all the good. Of course there's good. There has to be honey on the outside of the rotten apple for people to come and do things in this group. There has to be something of value. It doesn't negate the bad. And I know there's a lot of people struggling with a lot of organizations, specifically like Kundalini, people who've practiced for many, many years, a yoga practice, finding out that the leadership was corrupt and, you know, abusing all sorts of people and children and heinous things. And they're like, well, but like, I love my Kundalini practice. I don't bow down to that guy anymore. And I think he needs to be in jail, but what do I do with my practice? And this is something that we all have to figure out for ourselves. I know for us, and not everyone post NXIVM agrees, a lot of people did throw the baby out with the bathwater, but we have spent a lot of time looking at what tenets were helpful and where they came from originally. Like Keith literally had people go to like spiritual bookstores and highlight things and make curriculum out of it. It's literally plagiarized. We just have to find the sources.
There's another thing to consider too about willful ignorance. And I'll share a story. I read a book probably 15, 16 years ago called Stalin's Follies. I think it was this book or something. I read about Stalin for like a solid few months there. In 1990 or 1991, there was a survey done to the Russian people, and 52% of the Russian populace still looked at Stalin favorably. And this is a guy whose body count is close to 58 million people. Right? So there's something to be said about people's unwillingness to consider who they've deified as someone who can be a perpetrator. And it's willful in a lot of ways. You can show them the gulags, you can show them the body count, and they'll just go, yeah, but. Yeah. And that's Stalin. He's like, you know, he's top 2 villains in human history. So if that can still exist in a country that he abused consciously, you know, you can only imagine if your yoga practice guy who doesn't have that body count and maybe has a couple of rumors going around can get away with it.
Yeah. And I don't know if you know this, the parallel with the yoga community is perfect because this is a mind body fitness company. So it's just ding, ding, ding all around. So.
And it's still going, right? Like it's still teaching classes and
it's still going. Yeah. There's tens of thousands of students around the world. There's probably, I want to guess, 2,500 teachers, 50 trainers. It's going strong. Yeah. And they, you know, they are aware of the podcast and reached out to us. We aren't communicating. I say we because a colleague of mine came onto the podcast to tell her story with me. Yeah, it's still going strong. And this question I was asking selfishly more than anything, because the idea of naming the company and figuring out how and when to do that, it helps me a lot because there's a lot of people that are really going to be like, how could you destroy this wonderful thing? And I'm not trying to destroy anything. I want accountability, right?
That's it.
That's it.
That's it.
Yeah.
You're stopping abuse.
Exactly.
You know, a couple people gave us shit. And I said, you're not going to tell me how I'm going to protect my family, number one. And number two, you're not going to tell me how I'm going to hold this guy accountable. So your feedback, you can take it and shove it up your ass. It was really in the subtext. No, it is. It doesn't. You don't get to tell me how to hold people accountable. I'm doing the right thing.
Exactly.
You're
and
afraid.
I bet, Candice, you, in that regime, you had to take all feedback. Am I right?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
No, you can't get defensive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was always an issue of personal power. That was the phrase that was thrown around. Like, if you're not able to suffer abuse, you don't have enough personal power. Or if you question authority, then they gaslight you with all the tools to show you how it's something that you're not seeing clearly. And so, I mean, the whole framework is that, and talking with you is really helping me to understand and see how I'm doing these same things to myself.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And keeping me from taking certain kinds of actions and being brave with my life and my story.
strength in numbers is what we've always said. The more people that can, one person, it's easy to discredit.
Yeah.
Keep it up. Don't give up. You have allies in us. And I'm so glad you've connected with I Got Out, because lots of resources there and you'll feel less alone for sure.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Candice.
Keep in touch.
Okay. Take care.
Bye.
Well, that was a real treat. Mad love to Sarah and Nippy for being so generous with their time and so honest about their experiences. I could have spent a day talking with these two, and still we would have hardly scratched the surface. Lucky for you, there's a lot more for you to explore when it comes to their work. See the show notes for links to the A Little Bit Culty podcast, Sarah's book, and season 1 of The Vow. You can also follow them and A Little Bit Culty on Instagram. All the links are in the show notes. I'll be back next week, and Tracy Stamper will be joining me for a special interview with a new guest. It's a 2-parter, and you won't want to miss it. So I'll see you then, and be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast in the meantime. Until next time, thanks for listening. Ciao.